Alright, so Justin, say what you're into, your social, like, field of study, or like...
Anything music-wise, or not? Just one?
Since this is a topic about music, maybe connect that to a little bit to music.
Okay, so I'm a sociology and American Indigenous Studies major. I've taken a good collection of courses at Bard that pertain to music, like music theory, jazz, introduction classes, ensembles, and then I've been playing music since childhood, but sparse here and there, just kind of different instruments. Began with violin, then guitar, then piano, but it never has gotten like a stable instrument. It's just kind of, but that's pretty much.
What attracts you to music?
I think I'm very attracted to like the ear and the sense of like hearing. Like to me, that's one of the strongest senses for myself. Like, of course, like you have taste and all that shit, but I think listening, it provides a different experience for me, that it can be healing as well as like it provides like a source of solitude that you don't get. Of course, you can experience music collectively, but my main source of experiencing music is mainly individual, most of the time.
Even collectively, it's pretty singular, right?
Yeah, exactly. There can be like a point of like a collection of an embodied experience that everybody's experiencing together. So there is that component as well. But and I like music that it's free spirited. Of course, that music just sounds good, and that could be so subjective, but truly music to me that sounds good could be an array of things. Sometimes I'm just like listening to like pure distortion sounds, off like electronic experimental artists. Sometimes I'm listening to like bebop jazz, or sometimes I'm listening to a hip hop beat. You know what I mean? So music is just a variety of sounds and experiences that I just try to be as versatile in, but also find senses of like safety.
Like, cool.
Yeah, that was a long answer, but
no, it had the main words. I think the solitude and singular points are really cool. Okay, what's your relationship to drugs?
Relationship to
this
drugs.
Is all anonymous, by the way. You're going to be known as Jay. As Jay.
Okay.
Yeah, Jay the drummer.
Put me as B the drummer. Don't put my.
Okay, B the drummer.
Me as a sociologist telling you. Somebody's gonna definitely.
It's like, I know this.
Okay, so maybe don't tell my major though.
Okay.
So keep out certain things. Yeah, no, this is just also reminding me of like class too, because I have to do shit like this where I'm like, okay, how do you keep people anonymous? All right, my bad.
Yeah, don't worry.
But I guess my relationship to drugs. The only substances I've taken is coffee. JK. It's coffee, nicotine, an energy drink is caffeine. Weed, of course, and shrooms. I started pretty early. I think I started smoking nicotine first, and then that made its way up to weed at a kind of like a young age in the city, experimenting when I shouldn't have been. Now understanding like your frontal cortex lobe and all that shit, there's effects and shit, but whatever. But I started smoking weed at like 14, 15, and the first time it didn't work. I thought I was high, it wasn't. Second time it did, but I remember music being at the center of my experience. Like I'm usually the one who likes to be on the aux. Who likes to play the music, to think about, because sometimes people don't really want to think about what they're listening to. Some people are completely fine with just being the soundscapes being shaped by other people. But for me, I always kind of like the curation of a playlist, curation of songs. And I think
at least for the first one around.
That was ultimately what got me. And I think drugs too, in particular. Before that, I think I was interested in Woodstock and like the hippie era and psychedelics, and that was something as a kid. Before I even took anything, I was like, whoa.
Almost a stereotypical inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. Like my grandpa, like white man, who grew up with like folk music. His brother went to Woodstock, and he's talking to me how he almost went. So it kind of like
What is he like now, if I may ask?
He's dead.
Oh, he's dead. Yeah.
He's dead. But yeah, he's a great man though. He really put me on to a lot of the music I know and the ways that I connect. I don't know if I ever disclosed to him if I took drugs, but maybe he had some. I feel like he had some idea of like, you're young and people
probably
weren't
old enough when
exactly. But besides that, I'd say music, or what were we on music?
We were talking about drugs.
Oh yeah, drugs.
Your drug use, and I was gonna ask if you're ashamed of your habitual drug use, not necessarily the drug use itself, but the habitual nature of it.
I guess I don't like to carry the word shame.
Yeah.
I think there are medicinal uses, and of course there's abuse.
Yeah.
And those can bleed lines. Honestly, like, you know what I mean? Somebody's gonna say an opioid is medicine, but we know that it can become a source of abuse. Painkillers like Tylenol can be remedies, but they can also become a form of abuse. So it depends on, like you said, the habitual use of it, but then also, I don't like to, again, like weed in particular also stems from a lot of indigenous cultures and people, like shrooms as well. Like, so I do believe in the medicinal properties. Of course, we can't control what weed we're taking and whatever. But I don't think shame is an interesting way, but I don't think shame leads to any type of like healing or like moving on. Like it's a good tactic for the government. Yeah.
It doesn't really. The only thing that shame really does to me is like slap me on the wrist.
Yeah.
When I've smoked over time, like I can't really do anything now.
And realizing that was what the game my parents would do with me. They would play the shame game, like how dare you? Why would you do this? When you like grew up, you had such a good life, like. And the shame game, literally trying to shame you and say it's like you're other people, but no, there is individual and collective notions in drug use.
That's interesting. We're actually talking about something with parents here, that actually teaching your kid to be ashamed of certain things isn't the right call.
I don't think so. Like, again, the ethics and politics are different there. I'm not saying like parents should be giving their kids drugs.
Well, yeah.
Or like, you know what I mean? But giving the space, being like, if you want to try something, let me know first, we can talk about it. But like this like kind of like pop in on you and do this like intervention is kind of like, it works sometimes, but then it doesn't work for a while because
it has to be more educational, more to the point. Because if they were like, okay, if you smoke like 3 days in a row, you're not going to be able to do squat for a little bit. You're going to have to give yourself some time, or something like that. Or because even now when I smoke weed, I can still do my homework, I can still show up to class, I can still get the bare minimum done. Of course, it's not good work, and that's probably the part that they're shaming me about. I don't know, what do you find attractive about drugs?
I mean, attraction is an interesting word because it's like kind of putting in this like aesthetic to it. I don't know if it's a particular aesthetic. Again, it's more of like the emotion it evokes, and again, like it goes back to music, like the solitude. I think it slows things down for me, but it also speeds up things for me because like it's kind of an interchanging process, and I think I think it's something that has to do with the sensorium. Again, I love
sensorium.
I love like music, so when I'm high, I love listening to music, and that's something that continuously brought me back. Like, I'm like, damn, this Tame Impala album would go crazy if I was high. And I would, get high and be on the bus, train ride home, like an hour, so I'm listening to a full album. I just think it's like recurring experiences with music, as well as like, when I'm also smoking. I'm not just like, I'm outside, but sometimes I try to take different parts of my environment and just be grateful for it. And put intention to my smoking too. Like, if I'm smoking and the sun's out, I'm like, thank you, sun. Like, thank you for being here. Being grateful for the water I'm drinking. Like, so I try not to be like completely mindless, but I think it's also like what draws me back to it is like a routine, almost like a ceremony, an individual ceremony where like, more than ever, I think we need those check-ins with ourselves. And maybe like, again, substance use is not going to be the most. But again, there's medicinal uses.
It is funny. I did always call it like my personal ritual, you know?
Yeah, there's a ritual to it. It's a ceremony. I think that's something that, like, again, people come together collectively to, like, almost like a ritual. And that's the same way I was talking about indigenous people. Like, they came together to do shrooms, and they would be having visions about Jesus, like an indigenous Jesus, and indigenous, like, spiritual forces. So I'm not saying that's, like, what everybody's doing with weed, because I don't want to, like, diminish. But at the same time, people have that kind of ceremonial. Sometimes weed makes you actually way more vulnerable than people think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like, choosing to smoke every day is not. It is not an easy thing to do. You know what I mean? People think like, oh yeah, you can just get high and do whatever. But no, particularly if you're trying to function in social scenarios, you're not setting yourself up correctly in a way.
You're pretty freaked.
You're pretty freaked out if you're in a social situation, if you're like smoking a lot. So
a little bit of paranoia. Which is interesting because I feel like it's that paranoia actually seeps in the music, like the production of it. Mm-hmm. Because you hear, honestly, some of the best music out there is some of the most paranoid music I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, you have Sid Barrett from all the way back then, but now you have, like, Tyler, obviously. What do you think about the connection between drug use, how it affects the mind, and then music? That's probably going to be my last question.
Drugs, how it affects the mind and music?
Or at least drugs and music, and how they have more of a relationship that it goes beyond just, oh, I'm a musician, I do drugs, also I listen to music.
Again, I think, like, to, like, disrupt that gap is kind of like, not saying there's a methodology to it, but almost there's a method to it. Like, there's a recurrence of, like, repetition, and I think that, like, like, if you're in the studio, and, like, that's an interesting thing, like you were talking about a few weeks ago or something, but, like, some people in the studio, you said which artist we were talking about, but, like, he wouldn't record unless he was sober. Yeah. Maybe it was Elliott Smith you were talking about. In the studio. But, like, that's an interesting thing. Like, if you're in the studio and you have, like, a joint or a spliff, like, cool. But, if you're, like, completely, like, off fucking uppers and downers and trying to record something, like, nah, because also time is money, money is time. That, like, duality of... But it depends on the artist, too. If
it wasn't as good as a question as I wanted.
No, but I understand what you mean, though. Like, I think there is a interesting dynamic on drug use and music and, like, ethics of that. Mm-hmm. Because, like, does that make a person like, Santana, he took a tab of acid before he performed that he didn't know that. Yeah, I think it was, like, the Grateful Dead. I think Jerry Garcia gave him tabs of acid because they thought they were going to perform at night. They had to perform next right after them. So he was playing on the guitar, tripping, thinking it was a snake. You know, but that was one of his best performances. He had one of the best performances at Woodstock, even though he was one of the least paid. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, he literally rose to stardom because of that performance, but he was fucking tripping balls out with his whole band was tripping, but they performed. And I think that's what you can't take away from high-level musicians. Even if they're the most fucked up, they still are in groove and time with each other. And
they're still themselves.
Exactly. And I think that, again, like, they're still themselves. And I guess I think that's, like, what I want people to understand is that, like, yes, people are still themselves. And there is that whole component of, like, you are a different person when you're this or that. But there is ultimately, like, chemical makeup, social.
Well, it all comes down to your ego in some way. Where like it's like, I mean, the reason why like I sort of lit up when you said that was because I was like, ooh, wait, maybe sort of the moral philosophy of musicians with drugs, such as Elliott Smith, because he would go sober into the studio and then he'd live his life basically, and so. Like, there's this barrier between what is yourself and then the drugs you take to sort of break it down. And if you could perform even past that, it's like a rebelling, you know? Because that's how I feel when I do drugs. I'm like, even if I got all these handicaps, I'll burn this shit, or, you know.
No, and it's a good question. It's like, are drugs an extension, like, or is it a part of us? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it, like, you know what I mean? Like, is it something that we're holding, or is it something that's, like, literally our arm? You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the question is, like, does that...
Is it a relationship or a tool?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because I think I'm trying to think about it more in the relationship that, like, yeah, it is a tool, but then there is a relationship that has been bonded that makes this material thing that we try to distinguish ourselves from.
Because it's interesting, because it does inflict upon you some amount of feeling.
Mm-hmm. Like, exactly. As much as we want to distinguish it and differentiate it, it still has that personal, like, embodiment that you feel at the end of the day. So I think that's, I'd say whatever works for artists. Like, if they want to have that component and think that, like, stay sober.
Okay, real last question. Drug use at Bard. What do you think about it? Too much? Is it just calm? Just describe it to me.
I mean, in all honesty, I haven't been in scenarios where I've seen hard drugs. Yeah. I've heard about instances where I've seen hard drugs, but I haven't come across, like, you know, I've heard about coke, ketamine.
The pink stuff.
Yeah.
Or whatever it's called.
Tranquilizers, ketamine. But besides that, I think the most active that I see is smoking weed and, like, drinking.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's pretty much, like, college things. I think it's
East Coast, maybe.
East Coast, and also
it's
legalized here now, like, smoking weed. So I think that makes.
I mean, not for all the ages, actually.
Oh yeah, for all the ages though. But for 21 plus. But because of that, I feel like there's more of a leniency, even with security. Because now, like, I think they don't want to do the trouble of, like, IDing you and seeing how old you are and doing all that process.
I mean, security hasn't cared for 4 years.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, when I came in though, like, I would say there were stories of, like, security coming, taking people's grinders.
Yeah.
And
or like just for candles in the room or something.
You know, but, like, even if you were outside and doing it, they would take it. They were kind of like shitheads a little bit back then, because, but I think they've, like, learned up a bit, and students have been smarter. I don't feel like I've been seeing, like, reckless smoking all the time. I think the most poignant one is cigarette smoking though. Yeah. Like, that's everywhere.
Honestly.
And I think that's something to, like, question too. It's like, okay, yeah, people sure are not really high, but a nicotine buzz, like, that's interesting. Like, everyone kind of has this, not everyone, but...
It's not just nicotine buzz. It's the habitual feeling when I'm socializing with somebody and I'm socializing with people to smoking. Mm-hmm. And then it makes me want to start smoking and buy my own pack so I can socialize with people more. Yeah. And it creates a sort of system.
I think there's also something with fire. I think...
Yeah.
Fire
it's the oral fixation, the fire that makes it...
Like, you're, like, it's an initiation almost. Yeah. Like you're igniting it, you're activating it. The experience through that, like...
And you get the instant sensation. I mean, I got into smoking when I got here. I've been smoking weed since I was 16. And, like, I was clean for, like, the first 2 years at Bard Science Rock, even though it was boarding. Because I was, like, a little nerd math kid. But when I turned 16, got into weed, then here I got into cigarettes. So...
Yeah, no, Bard will do that to you. Same here. I think, like, once in a while when I was in the city, like, maybe senior year, I was like, all right, maybe a cig once in a while, but...
Yeah, when you're, like, 14, I don't think you smoke cigarettes.
Yeah,
you sort of just,
Yeah, exactly. Unless, like, you're, like, I don't know.
That weed's more fun at that top point anyway. Yeah. I couldn't really...
Some people, I feel like I wouldn't be surprised, some people actually start smoking cigarettes earlier than weed.
I never felt the cigarette early on, you know?
No, I mean, like, more of, like, I don't know, like, that, like, country South or, like, rural America type, like, they're a bit more lenient in terms of cigarette use. Like, there's more space that, like, if one was to sneak a cigarette.
There's basically no eye in the sky.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly, and I feel like with weed there is, but it's like when you decide to make that, like, switch to weed, you're like, you're in it. Like, you're like, if I get in trouble, I get in trouble. It's kind of like...
That's the interesting part about here, because there is an eye in the sky, but they just don't care. Okay. Thank you, Justin. Oh my god, that wasn't too bad. 19 minutes.
Alright, that's not bad.